Good morning. This is Dr. Hansa Das, and once again, I welcome you to my channel History with Hansa. We've been doing a series of videos on the economic history of modern India, and we have seen how colonial rule exploited the Indian economy. In this section, we are going to discuss today about deindustrialization in colonial India, how colonial rule resulted in deindustrialization. We are basically going to talk about the debate on deindustrialization, how the imperialists have viewed it, and how the nationalists have viewed it, and how there is a difference of opinion between the two. So today's video will focus upon the debate surrounding the concept of deindustrialization in colonial India. So let us begin with the video. Deindustrialization of the Indian economy has been a recurrent theme in Indian economic history. We've been studying constantly about deindustrialization while we study the colonial exploitation of Indian economy. India was supposed to have undergone it while under the British, primarily as a consequence of their commercial policies. It was the commercial policies of the British which resulted in deindustrialization, which resulted in the decline of industries in India. The conventional doctrine starts with the notion of traditional India, a subsistence economy into which came the shattering influence of market forces, represented by Western commercial and industrial competition, reinforced by the power of the modern imperial state. So, when uh, the traditional economy was destroyed by colonial exploitation, we see the beginning of deindustrialization in India, how India was reduced to the status of an exporter of raw materials to England and an importer of British manufactured goods, which was just opposite to what was actually there in traditional India, when it was an exporter of cotton textile industries on a large scale. The debate surrounding the issue of deindustrialization, the issue is widely debated, and there are two major viewpoints in this regard: the imperialist and the nationalist. Let us look into the imperialist view. The imperialist view of the Indian economy held that the pre-colonial India was marked by high taxation, tremendous administrative chaos, political anarchy, and it was the British rule which ushered in a prosperous era of agricultural expansion and modernization. So the imperialist view is all positive about colonial rule, and it says that colonial rule did not bring about deindustrialization, rather it united the country politically and also ushered in a prosperous era of agricultural expansion. This view was propagated mainly by scholars like Alfred Loyal, W. W. Hunter, and Moreland. On the other hand, the nationalists strongly refuted this contention and argued that there was hardly any economic development during the British rule, and they emphasized colonial exploitation and considered commercial policy of the British, high import duty on Indian exports and nominal tariff on British exports to India as the chief causes for the decline of old industries in the end of 18th and beginning of the 19th century. So now we will look individually into how the nationalist historians have discussed the concept of deindustrialization in India under the British. Let us begin with RC Dutt. RC Dutt says that the manufacture of textiles, both silk and cotton, fell, and the resulting unemployment of artisans reduced India from the status of a manufacturing country to that of an agricultural farm. So, as already discussed, India was reduced to the status of an exporter of raw materials and therefore to an agricultural farm, just in opposite to what it had been earlier, an exporter of cotton textiles on a very large scale. And RC Dutt points out that by 1937, agriculture was the only national industry of the people. Madan Mohan Malviya, he stressed that there was a deliberate sacrifice of Indian industries to serve British interests. The early nationalists reiterated their emphasis on poverty as a result of this situation, which is best exemplified in Dadabhai Naoroji's poverty and un-British rule in India. I have done a video on drain of wealth in which we have discussed in detail Dadabhai Naoroji's concept of drain of wealth as he has enumerated in poverty and un-British rule in India. Now, they demanded state protection of Indian industries, banking facilities, and technical education. If we compare the industries or the industrial situation in India between the pre-British and British times, we find that historians have used various indices to show this difference. For example, Daniel Thorner has made an occupational structure. He has made occupational structure the basis of his study, and Daniel Thorner points out that the census figures of 1931, as compared to those of 1881, indicate a fall in industrial workforce and rise in agricultural. But there are other factors to be considered. The accompanied decline of handicrafts is a feature that occurs in all countries when entering the industrial phase. So, as Daniel Thorner puts it, it is not specific to India. That is, the decline of handicrafts is not specific to India. It was happening in all the countries when entering the industrial phase. The figures for manufacture and trade are taken together as a single category, as the rural worker was most of the times maker as well as the seller. Agricultural production was virtually constant and the industrial structure practically stationary. Thus, there is no support for the deindustrialization argument, and at the onset of the analysis, Indian economy was already agricultural. So, this is what Daniel Thorner has put forward his views on deindustrialization. Then we have J. Krishnamurti, who disagrees with Daniel Thorner and considers that it does not disprove deindustrialization, his argument. He believes that a more meaningful index will be the proportion of total industrial output to the total output, and it will give a fair idea of whether there was an upward or downward movement in industrial production. He also says that an entire household does not depend on one industry or activity only. Also, the industrial worker was not engaged in any one activity only. Morris David Morris, while the nationalists are talking about this so-called exploitative thesis, Morris David Morris challenges this exploitative thesis of the nationalists and points out that in a politically unstable and commercially weak state, the British brought stability, standardization, and efficiency. So instead of bringing about impoverishment, the imperialist view states that the British had actually brought about stability and standardization and efficiency in the Indian economy. There was development in transport and communication, which stimulated economic activity. This is what Morris David Morris says. And he also believes that the notion that Manchester machine made textiles wiped out the Indian handicraft industry is wrong, for it actually strengthened the competitive position of the indigenous handlooms. Also, with a rise in per capita real income, the demand for cotton and textiles in the Indian market registered an increase. The import of textiles was only to cover the rise of demand that could be satisfied by the internal market. Then we have Tapan Ray Chaudhary, who is also critical of Morris David Morris, and he points out certain facts. He says that per capita income did not rise substantially, economy stagnated, and it was not growing. The modern sector comprised only extractive industries, and also he makes it clear that per capita income is not a reliable indicator of economic change. Bipin Chandra. Bipin Chandra joins Tapan Ray Chaudhary in attacking Morris, and he emphasizes the structural aspect of the Indian economy. He states figures and shows that the import of cloth increased between 1849 and 1899. If the artisans survived, they did so by cutting into their capital and subsistence. There is no evidence of increase in artisanal population. Also, Bipin Chandra says that Morris gives no evidence of the increase of per capita income which he is talking about. Bipin Chandra concludes that economic forces were inhibiting industrial growth at each stage. Now, let us take an example and a case study of the handloom industry. A detailed examination of the handloom industry will show the actual condition. Now, Booker and Hamilton's survey of the districts of Purnia, Bhagalpur, Patna, Gaya, and Shahabad, that is the Gangetic Bihar region, gives figures for the population supported by industries in 1809 to 1813, and A.K. Bagchi has compared them with those of the 1901 census and has shown that there was an absolute fall in the population supported by industries. But Vijayani has disputed his use of figures on several accounts. This is so because categorization becomes difficult as families and individuals were engaged in multiple activities and could not be classified under one occupation. If we make an analysis of the industrial trends of the specific industries, then different trends could be seen. For example, cotton and silk textiles underwent a massive decline, as also woolens but not carpet making. Leather industry faced stiff competition. Metal and woodwork and pottery did reasonably well. Ornaments of metal and lac retained their importance. Rice processing industries remained unaffected up to the beginning of the 20th century. Finally, we could say that in structural terms, the textile industry remained important as a field of employment, despite the fact that underemployment became increasingly significant, and it remained an integral, though marginalized, part of the Indian economy. But when we are talking about the complexity of changes that occurred in Indian economic life under the impact of British rule, to talk about deindustrialization and destruction of textile industry would be simple. So this is how we conclude the deindustrialization debate, how the imperialists and nationalists have put forward different opinions regarding deindustrialization, regarding the exploitation of the Indian economy by the colonial rule. So this was about deindustrialization. Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you like the video. Thank you.